아니 당아서 디 랑선어서 시작진도라 다 갈라나 다기 아니 가서 다 연중 제가 장지게 조금 말했어 아니 상주고 생적으로 해서 아니 상주 생긴다 시다 이내명아 되니고는 생지다 다제냥제기 생지 참아도 살아 다 딜레기도 상주 생주지 다 상주 상주 생드랑주를 지차여지라 아니 슈터 초지 준지 체르라 doka lejin chiwan tangwe danze chachi chayi busu mari mebi machen kune tevila ta pena shanchu kusen raji le che tsa suna ya ani tandu khala wala na ta di cheba tsamji ma yin para ma nyam bachini ma juni ra choji la diga la ta na di shekidwa ma chun re chu za chu ani yalung tsangpo yin ra diji la choshi la ta khanda di kare la wala na shanchu kusen raji le che tsa yin ma nyam bachini ma takala mituni ma dogo ya tishingura ani shuta choji junji chiris tinde we chene karache gola na doka leji nganzu le la de lende de namsha de ta kale habu marara suzuki chiye na debu di nyongo wa le ya ga sa ina duwa sa ina wa doka leji chingwa la de ngana ta nganzu sibo khwal ne de wa yin chingwa de dam de ya jira 진짜 간주 딘데 렌데기 남샤이다 레기 온게 간주 콜라 친제스 콜라 찡바 맞아 담보 담에 봐라 간주라 라와민도 간주 소소시 라주 녀몽 뜻선 라주를 여와인사 간주 제가 나 치기다 소소라 마딜라 치기 디딘데질 치기라는 간주라 라와민도 와 대서 가르는 딘데 렌데기 남샤이기 땅에서 담데 레라 디데 간나 단제에 가르서는 짝이 쭈나시지 봐 짜질레데 심지스서드네 장무지야 디나시라 단제 짜치 주수 끄네 자위 부수 추스라 당아도 거리기 추드는 찍네 아니 다바로선 딘데기 마 담디지로 차오레스 가서 콰바도 찌니 칼라나 단제기 찡데요 인자 디 칼로 단제디 짜치 주수 디는 추디 레스라 타와 부수 추르디 건 심지스서기 딘데 탈라니도 net lagra o dindegi busu dinna chedejiro res ani chingni karana mari membe nganju khari ge wange le da nyomondo so mari bi wange nganju le sa ko le ngem ba ra di khalana mari pa te ani phachen libe nagumdo ra nganju nagumdo jin chede ba ra mari membe phachen ko ne thibli nganju be de drip dio ta nganju se chede rashigi chidange simja thajala ani saji gri seri yula worde 안저 티마 로보가 디디오라 티마 로보가 가르스나 녀모비 두바다 시제 디보기 디디오라스 그 망타마스
So then now moving along with the text, before we move along with the text, just to revise what we have discussed so far, we talked about the purpose of developing renunciation along the spiritual path, the manner in which to develop renunciation in the spiritual path, and then the measure of having achieved or having developed such a renunciation. Then after that we also talked about that renunciation in itself is not enough to cultivate an effective spiritual path. This renunciation must be sustained by the awakening mind of bodhicitta. And in our discussion about bodhicitta, we talked about the definition of bodhicitta and the methods through which one can personally generate or develop such an awakening mind. We talked about the two methods, one, the 7 precepts of causes and fruit, 2, the process of equalizing the self with the others. So it is through these methods one can begin to generate the awakening mind of bodhicitta. Now moving along with the text, we are at now verse number 7. So herein it talks about how one can carry the contemplation in order to awaken that mind of bodhicitta, that altruistic intention. So 7, beings are swept along by the powerful current of the 4 rivers, tightly bound by the chains of their karma, so difficult to undo, ensnared within the iron trap of their self-grasping and enshrouded in the thick darkness of ignorance. So herein, when it says beings, beings herein refers to all sentient beings. So beings are swept along by the powerful current of the four powers. So in our previous discussions, we talked about how samsara is understood as that uncontrollable cycle of birth and death. So the four powerful currents, tanda chushile chega nachila pa jargedwa. So the metaphor that is used here to describe that uncontrollable cycle of birth and death is the four rivers. The four rivers herein refers to birth, aging, sickness and death. So this kind of uncontrollable circle perpetuates itself again and again in samsaric existence. So beings are swept along by the powerful current of the four rivers of aging, sickness, death and birth, tightly bound by the chains of their karma, so difficult to undo. So escaping or being liberated from samsaric existence is an extremely difficult task because samsaric existence is conditioned, as we already discussed, primarily by our actions, which is karma, and ensnared within the iron trap of their self-grasping. So we also talked about how our karma or our actions are in turn conditioned or influenced by the afflictive emotions. Now, herein we are getting at the root of samsara, ensnared within the iron trap of their self-grasping. So all of the afflictive emotions that we experience at their root stem from this self-grasping, grasping at an innate self, at an absolute self. In other words, an innate conception of the self, which lies at the root of samsara. And now moving on, and enshrouded in the thick darkness of ignorance. So this ignorance relates to that innate conception of the self. This innate conception of the self is understood as a form of ignorance, the very deep-seated form of ignorance. So one begins to contemplate on the nature of samsara and samsaric existence in this manner, that we as sentient beings trapped in samsara do not really have any control over our birth and our death, and this is in turn due to our karma and afflictions, and these in turn stem at their root from that innate conception of the self, which is a form of ignorance. Thus.
Tadinde insa digala ani danda tsumari pe timdi res la ra tinde insa meme ba tatame ba la ra meme siba ngaz siba kwala yani de che ora tie karasana lenyo ko wanki chi res ngaz mari be wanki le ma ba sa le sa wala tene ani le da nyomo wanki ngaz kwala yanse yanse che wala ra chu jena je zoya me chi li de res meme siba che shin che wa res ti na lo la ani ngaz dunghe su ra che ga na chi dunghe ra die je ma che ba 다간도 가라야 콜레제 야제 안나 야게 아시 엔데 좀 거라제더라 등에 숨지 진치 메바 나라라서 가서 가디나 다 내거 춘주지랑 가서 대화를 줘와이네 간다 제가 나지 등에 유거라 가서 미스 딜레다나 담보치 등에 제 등에 가서 템바 소유면 되데 단 나유 등에 되네 게 등에 돼 치 등에 딱딱래 되거라 근데 이 제가 등에디 아니 제 마치 바 초제나시 딱딱도 되고레스 근데 인디가라 다 가라서 근데기 내거 빌라 내딩이라 내거 던더 집이 만남치 레디가라 다 소소 집어 마이 봐 마지 심저다랑 당이 가도 마이라네 두차라 심저다랑 마이 바데 저와 디마 마이나 저와 가만가만 내가 좀 마치니 근데기 만남나 아니 등에 든데 중요이나 와 다 중요이나 내거 던더 집이 만남치 근데기 내거 깔레 카보 강이 트디니 근데기 만나지 치데스 안주 삼네 콘주기 있다 콘주기 치데 삼단라 안주 샤주세 라지리 제고야 돼 가르라나 예심제 탐제 일라 미니 대다 등에 텐드기 제 넘버 젤라디고 수수 집어 많이 봐 예심제 탐제 등에 텐드기 대회 텐드기 제 넘버 젠지라 와다 갈라나 라니라 샤주기 심지 라지리 제고도스라 제네 디 갈라나 샤주기 세게 미유 가르라나 ngachibu tabata ngachibu chibuta hashida marara chanchu sen raji de je kola mi karalana ku ge chanchu sen ngodo de kalana je simja tanje ge tend nge chegu dusra tinde chewala nga saji gomata udus tinde ge sem chiba wajira ra tinde nga sanne karsanganza sam ne se senchu chepranzo yoladi tendewi ani ta majin roar dusunja tanji dunghe de samne tila masoi pegi ani rani la shanchu kusen rani la chewa churela
ta tanda dina la dunghe sumle dina zogi chaba duji gi dunghe dunghe gi dunghe ani juwe dunghe tisum la jabur singda
dunghe sumle a
nas
chega na chi de ina jere juwe dunghe chaba de tig din ta tan rode gora
so then moving along, verse number 8, again and yet again they are reborn in limitless samsara and constantly tormented by the three forms of suffering. And this is the current condition of all your mothers from previous lives. Contemplate their plight and generate supreme bodhicitta. So herein we are touching now upon the purpose as well as the nature of the altruistic intention. We already talked about how we must identify sentient beings as having been our mothers in a previous life. So as such, we develop that attitude of equanimity towards all sentient beings as our mothers. Now, as we understand that this is the condition, this is the condition of sentient beings in samsara, then we are encouraged at this point to develop that altruistic intention of bodhicitta. So as we already discussed, the uncontrollable cycle of birth and death in samsara, then all beings are subject to that uncontrollable cycle of birth and death. And in that existence of uncontrollable cycle of birth and death, they are tormented by the three forms of suffering. So the three forms of suffering herein refers to the suffering that characterizes all forms of existence in samsara, from the top of samsara to the depths of hell. So these three forms of suffering are suffering of suffering, suffering of change, and the pervasive suffering of conditioning. And so by reflecting on the condition of samsaric existence and the manner in which all sentient beings suffer in these conditions, then as we already look towards sentient beings as having been our mothers, then we need to generate the supreme mind of bodhicitta, which takes it upon itself to liberate sentient beings from samsara. So now we have come to the true purpose of generating the altruistic intention and the nature of such an intention. Yes.
Tatanda dungi su de shawayna pena chagana chi gi mareka dungi gi dungi ju dungi chabanda ji dungi su de shawayna ra ta dungi gi dungi la na ngachu khoe gi dungi la na ne shambara tigala ya zanza ngachu ngo na wa da keba na wa da chingnai li da dungi gala ya dungi thobach le do ra dungi chi dungi es juru dungi la di ngachu ne ka khatu pa tauna dewa yo baro ra ani ya jurumbu tenta ne dungi ngo jiro chaido juru dungi la pena ngachu kaniro shina pena tana ngachu chawa shu chigo ra telra chawa shu china ani shulomandra ni lungsi sandra na ne ka kiuro sto yang kama kashi de lungma mo je yang ngachu cha yung do tende kesi dewa chini pa ina kun jigu mara ine dewa chini pa mai ne ka jila ngachu dile tere phagila dewa jiyo ba ina ya jurumbu tenta ne yang joan do ra chita ngachu mambo chi tanda ngachu chi so semman hai chen ro de party ro de tanga ji kiuro mi ji de mi ji bu tang la kha shora ine patatu ne dunge ngon ji do shi le gora de de ju do che tanga zo tinde la india chera tan ju do ge che ani chaban de ji gi dunge la de to khabur ra chaban de ji gi dunge la de ngar ta tinde la chu ni chen thor si chen ne man na me pal la ro da chi yora ta kanda ganda opa 상마 찹빈도 라 딘디기 둥이들라 찹반데 지기 둥이스 스당이 패셔널레션 토시스는 만남이 바데 찹디니 딘데들라 찹반데 지기 둥이라 오라 딘디기 간도 야시야시야스 나된다 딘디기 콜라 야시야스 코디고 인자 아니 델라 탄디고 로치고래라
딘디다 나가서 찹바도 지기 둥이들라 덴바시기 마드여줘라 딘나라 주드좀바 산지 고랑기 니 만족이 품부지어라
사진여름 품부
품부디 고랑 아니 잡아두지기 눈이기 sensitive. So now herein we touched upon the three forms of suffering in samsara. So the three forms of suffering in samsara, as we discussed, are the suffering of change, and the pervasive suffering of conditioning. Now, when we look at these three types of suffering, the first two are quite easily recognizable. The first more easily recognizable than the second, and the third one is the most difficult to identify as a form of suffering. Now, many of our suffering in samsara actually comes from being unable to identify suffering as suffering, knowing suffering as suffering. So the first type of suffering, it refers to the suffering of pain. Suffering of suffering, in effect, means suffering of pain. So when we undergo through pain, emotional or physical, we are able to identify it as suffering. So this is quite easily recognizable. On top of the suffering of aging, sickness, death, birth, and so forth, we have other forms of suffering. A headache in between, physical ailments in between, so forth, which we know to be suffering. Now, the second type of suffering refers to the fleeting nature of the pleasurable experiences in samsara. Our ideas about happiness are informed by a experience being pleasurable, and we equate that with happiness. Now, the suffering of change, with the suffering of change, one is advised to look at momentary pleasures as not happiness, but as suffering of change. For example, in this hot weather, we feel uneasy sitting without the fan. But then if we have to sit in a fan all the time, that pleasurable experience does not remain a pleasurable experience. So that experience in itself changes into changes its nature into one of suffering. So many of these pleasurable experiences, which we equate with happiness in our lives, are indeed in the nature of suffering, because they change their nature into one of suffering later on. And then third is the suffering, the pervasive suffering of conditioning. So herein, two things, pervasive and conditioning. So this is said to be the most difficult form of suffering to recognize, and pervasive in the sense that it pervades all realms of existence in samsara, from the top of samsara to the depths of hell, to the bottom of hell. So since it pervades all realms of existence, it is pervasive. And then pervasive and conditioning, or the pervasive conditioning of suffering. So conditioning herein refers to the fact that once you have taken birth in samsara, that birth, that aggregate, that body, that physical body, or what we in Buddhism call the psychophysical aggregates that makes up who we are itself born from contaminated causes. Contaminated causes in the sense are afflictions and our actions. So as such, that physical aggregate in itself is conditioned by the causes of suffering. Thus.
Ta ka lai dula ra ta ngin ju shang se yang ta ba de shi cha chi ta ti la ra ne lu to bi hire me de nas ke si ta nga ta to nyu to bi hire le shi go ra ke si ngin ju ta yin le ngin ju go la sa ngin ju lo che go andi ke la ja ngin ju lo cham ni me di ba shang ju se ran je che go ba ra ta de ni chi bu ye ba cham je di ge ma re ani to nyu to bi hire che go ba te go ra 저는 내게 가서 내루토비 싫어 메데나 계속 된데 돈이토비 힐로데 메바이나라 메데나데 다데 dengu 비즈세 되어라 연중다 상추 있으면 공시장 계속 공부하다 근데 제가 있나요 라 시바 코에게 짜와데 쥐쥐랑 아주 인지민이 똑바니 또 돈이토비 싫어도 그래라 근데 계속 돈이토비 싫어도 메바이나 연중까지 와이나 상추세 라지를 제가 있나요 시비 짜와데 쥐투고 말해라 원내는 된데도 쥐투고지라 시비 짜와 쥐바 미니베스 근데 미니베 진짜들 때네 대실 텐데 또 비탈은 베스라 근데 아니 텐데 또 텐데 라 주니라 소바 아니 찍질레 텐데 봐 알바 아니 파게 랑은 츠투바 메바 똥도가 아니 텐데 로디 가 돈이도 비시르로 샤오라 파게 랑 유응 라충을 투밤바 르 파샤바 자니다 아니 다 텐데지게 똥이게 로 돈이도 비시르디 아니 가서 대시텐데 또 비탈은 베스 텐데 돈이도 비시르 라질레 제와라 제발은 베고레스리라
Now moving on, verse number 9. if you lack the wisdom that realizes the nature of things, although you might grow accustomed to renunciation and bodhicitta, you will be incapable of cutting through conditioned existence at its root. Exert yourself, therefore, in the methods for realizing interdependence. At this point, even if you have cultivated effectively and generated both renunciation and bodhicitta, but if you have not realized the wisdom of emptiness, which understands the nature of reality as it is, then one still would not be able to cut samsaric existence or the cause of samsaric existence from its root. It might be the case through renunciation and awakening the mind of bodhicitta that one might be able to combat or overcome the gross forms of suffering or the gross or manifest causes of suffering, but the very root and subtle cause of suffering in samsara still wouldn't be overcome without the wisdom of emptiness. So, as it says, if you lack the wisdom that realizes the nature of things, herein referring to the ultimate nature of reality, and wisdom herein refers to wisdom of emptiness, and then the conditioned existence at its root. So as we already discussed, that at the root of samsaric existence is an ignorance of the innate conception of the self as well as phenomena. So as such, understanding that even if you have cultivated renunciation and bodhicitta, if you still have not cultivated an understanding of the wisdom of emptiness, then you cannot cut the root of samsara. So then one must apply oneself in the spiritual path to realizing emptiness. So the last line is very important. Exert yourself, therefore, in the methods for realizing interdependence. So when we say emptiness, one of the easiest way to kind of grossly understand what we mean by emptiness is to understand what do we mean by interdependence. So when we say things are empty of being truly established, having inherent existence or essential existence, what we mean is if things do not exist inherently, then they must exist interdependently. And if they exist interdependently, then they have no inherent existence. Yes.
Tanda di sibi tsawa la di gala, sibi tsawa di khalana danze mari badra. Khalana kuzo gi nga siba khoya la ju di danze mari pai wangi. Ra, digi wangi nga tsul kwa di wara. Di nga tsul tsawa do dana ju le di wa inza, di mari pai wangi ani nga tsul le mambu sago ra. Mari pai nguyu ne tsu yu chi shi sewu thoma tuwe chayi, padriba chayi. Ra, di il tene ani le mambu jisa, le mambu jisa le dan nyo mambu. Digi wangi ani nga tsul kwa la yansi ngoya di.
So at this point it is also important to understand when we say that you will be incapable of cutting through conditioned existence at its root. So the root of conditioned existence herein referring to samsaric existence. So the root of samsaric existence is understood to be a form of ignorance, and more particularly the ignorance of innate conception of the self. Now in simple words, grasping at a self. Now, not simply grasping at a self, but grasping at a self as being independently existent, as being objectively existent. So when we begin to develop a conception that the self or the I exist independently, then we impute an objective existence onto the self. And then as the self begins to relate with what it calls its own, I and mine, then with regards to phenomena, it also begins to object an imputed existence where there is no objective existence. So this is the manner in which ignorance clouds our perception of reality. And as a result of that, we begin to suffer.
Tanna kashi konde chunam thaji ta che thamji ra chunam thaji jis jinde tanga jinde tende la jira jinde namya ho ma tanda di ko so le da jinde namja de shin ko res ra jinde ho me ba su ge le duje ji sai na ti debu nyong ko ba le nyamba le yakpo ji sai na de debu de ba kuni lo am pen le ya po ji sani debu dunge wo ya ndo ta ani le duja ji sani debu zambo ya de yo mar kuni jo ndo ya mar so so kar le du asai ne du ende bo ya asai ne ya ndo ra de lo am yo mala de kala so so kar che ne ding debu nyong ra de ge na ja de to da le de ge na sha de to res la ra jinde 가서 나면 로아 메톤에 되게 하고 그거지. 다 오늘 디시잖아 가서나 다 덴제기 미디 단다가 저기 미비 떼서라지다. 미비 떼서도 가서나 덴제로 산 되게 신전사로라. 미비 떼서 가이 거식 소소기 땅가서 덴바제서 시진네 덴바투파레 삼로고를 샤디에디 다 되게 미비 떼서도 봐 시고로 덴바투바 마이바. 라 먼저 로 파타자지 투바다. 아니 벽에 유응을 투메바지 또 와, 되게 된적이 미디 시라디가라다. 동의기, 동시 최전의 라. 동시 최전의 대매고 마두바 파시바치 마치. 되지라 샤스.
Yes. So now moving on, verse number 10. The one who sees that cause and effect operate infallibly for all the phenomena of samsara and nirvana, and for whom any object or any objects of conceptual focus have subsided, has set upon the path delighting all the Buddhas. Now herein we are touching upon the law of causality or karma and its relation with the wisdom of emptiness. So when we say that emptiness negates through the analysis rational analysis carried forward in the meditation on emptiness, when we say that emptiness negates the essential existence or inherent or objective existence of self and phenomena, it should not be the case that it begins to refute the functionality of actions and their causes. So it is not the case that karma operates only in terms of samsara. Karma operates only in terms of samsara, because it is not the case that because when we look at liberation and enlightenment, it also has a cause. So as such, the law of karma operates infallibly within the context of both samsara and nirvana. And now the third verse, this is important to understand, because as we already talked before, that at the root of samsaric existence is an innate conception of the self. So this innate conception of the self is a mistaken conception. So as such, this conception has an object, yes, or a basis, so to say. So when that basis of that conception, which is false, begins to subside, then one has now walked upon the path that delights the Buddha. One has now come towards understanding emptiness.
그래서 미비돼서 가이 것이 내서 시바나 시바체네 아니 대네 사제 집이 라라슈라디다 사제 제발라디 페투니 바로 있어라 제비게 람라디 람다 단다 디라콘디데 양타베기 음메기 람로스라 다 간데 직소서 타바다 터지 제베네 라라코나디 그래 양타베 음메 라라슈 단다 디페 칼카버치다 라 So
I can understand that if at this point the discussion is proving a little bit difficult to follow along with, because it is not an easy topic to kind of discuss immediately. Be assured that you can ask any questions in the coming question and answer session. So another way of understanding when we say that, and for whom any objects of conceptual focus have subsided. Now think about it in this manner. When we say that emptiness means that things do not have any objective existence, then the manner in which we perceive things is not perceive things as it is, because we have conceptualized the manner in which it exists. So then we begin to objectify reality through our own conceptual thinking. So there is an object of, so there is a sort of a focus of objectification, a basis of objectification. So when one is able to overcome that basis of objectification, then one has now entered the path which delights the Buddha. So, just a minute. So the path herein refers to what we in Buddhism call the middle path, the middle way. A middle way which does not falls to the extremes of nihilism, which does not falls to the extremes of permanence. A middle way wherein you are able to posit the functionality of phenomena and then also to negate the objective existence of phenomena.
What is objectification?
Tang anzogi yu yora, yu rangwin duba la jora, di kare lagi yores, yu rangwin dube zimba jora, wati la kare lagi yores.
Zimbad la. Zimbad lo la shamba.
So objectification herein refers to a mind first, because that kind of objectification is a function of the mind which cognizes an object, right? So that process of cognizing the object and then imputing an existence onto the object is a process of the mind. So objectification is actually a mistaken mind in itself.
Re nga zo lo di khala na mai pa ji ba ren zen de ra. Nge ma ne ta khala dan ze mari bo wang ki ra. Ra shu pe nga shu shu yi nga zo den ba zen de ra. Mai pa ji la lo pan zen de. Ji ta dan zen la de ne shi do. Ta ji dang yi pa shu che mo shen na ka sa ga dan ze che dan ze la ma bo ya ra. Ta ten de di bi ji nga ra shi shi ma ka le khau da.
So now if we really have to kind of carry this discussion forward, then we really have to explore it really, really deeply. But try to understand it in this manner, that we have a conception of the self as being independent, being objectively existent. Now that conception in itself is a function of a mistaken mind. Right? An idea is still a function of a mind or an aspect of a mind. So that is what we mean by objectification, conceptualization, conceptual elaboration. And all of this in effect points toward what we talked about, that innate conception of the self, that grasping at the self. Now, if we really have to go into a detailed discussion, it will prove difficult for you as well as me.
네, 저도 그때 고대였으라. 답변은 차와 전부되게 찍나야. 또 시야기 조자대야 차부쳐. 강에 이제다. 다 대서도 다다 댄즈 만리처라.
So then, are you able to kind of follow along a little bit with the discussion at this point? Because I'm worried that the weather is not quite agreeable. Then the subject matter at hand at this point is a little bit difficult. Tini Thangpa la jura nganzo. Oti Geshe tis jatunas.
Thangpa la thamje chamani jura. Taganzo thamje chamala jura tatuna Thangpa re. 네, Thangpa la de nego ta na to khwa da nyeso de tharo ra. Khwa le tharo la Thangpa re si chi. Ta thamje chamala ga Thangpa chambola de de be tatu gu Thangpa de karasna thamje chama che thamje gi nelu to ra. 최타지 시자타지를 넣어주지 봐. 근데 샤라. 근데 가서 수준이 뭐 받창이 빵 시자타지를 넣어주지 봐. 대야 타바샤. 단다가서 뒤쪽에 내 주지 마힌 뒤 나로로 쳐리. 자기 도와. 그래서 타베기 담샤지 짜지기 진샤지. 아니 마리베기 팁샤지. 또 창마 뒤 나로로. 그래서 단다 에너지 내대 거라. 또 삼을 봐 타서나 탈바라지.
So herein it is important to understand that nirvana refers to liberation from samsaric existence. And in some contexts, people seem to equate nirvana with enlightenment itself. But maybe this is not always the case. So liberation, if we need to understand liberation, first we need to kind of go back to our discussions about samsaric existence. How we are chained in samsaric existence because of our actions, karma, and afflictions. So if one is able to overcome afflictions, then one is no longer bound to samsaric existence. So liberation or nirvana in effect means that you are able to overcome and abandon the afflictions, which in turn condition our actions. So if you are able to overcome karma and afflictions, then you are in some ways liberated from samsaric existence. Now enlightenment refers to a state of realization which is more than simple liberation. It refers to the complete and perfect development of all qualities of the mind, wherein you overcome all forms, not just gross forms of afflictions, but all the subtle forms of afflictions, subtle forms of ignorance.
다다가서 콜라 네데 치디 칼라나 뇨모 투소저라 뇨모 발라 투소도 가는 레샤 셰당 티무 라 티수 안게 안에 가서 레냐 바사난 콜라 세시 코데 라
So at this point I think it is also important to understand what do we exactly mean by afflictions. So afflictions can simply be understood as the disturbing emotions that we experience, the disturbing emotions which influence our actions, speech, our attitudes, and so forth. And now when we say that the afflictions and karma condition samsaric existence, then we can understand that even though there are so many different types of afflictions, but broadly we can say that all the other kind of afflictions are derivative or are derived from these three root afflictions of anger, attachment, and ignorance. So if you look at all our actions, thoughts, behavior, and so forth, we can begin to understand that it is informed by either of these three afflictions.
Yeah.
So it says the objects of conceptual focus have to be subsided. But right now we are trying to conceptualize emptiness. So without conceptualizing what would a real experience or realizing emptiness feel like or look like? I know the answer will also be a concept. What would realizing emptiness look like without a concept?
Tatanda nganzogi dela da injina la inde juer tanda nganzogi dela mikpe teso la jora. Mikpa la de zamba ta tokpa gi chachi chagi da.
ale bibi teso
Mikpa gi teso la tokpa gi mikpa.
topa danzero
ra tokpa chagi ra. Injina la da mikpe teso la di tokpa gi ra. Tokpa gi mikpa jora. Tokpa da nganzo denzi danzi khare inai di tokpa ra. Tokpa gi mikpa this ra shignas. Ani nganzo ge ani ta tongi tokpa yana ani jewa namjebe lamla shuba re la ki chigi ras. Ta tanda mikpe teso di shignas ra ani tongi garo togi be namba ji tongi doas. Ani thedewe ta tanda nganzo gi samlo tang yundu zamba ani nganzo gi tongi la te wona samlo tang la sra. Ani tokpa pheju tang doas. Junzen pheju tang gore tokpa pheju tang doas. Ani tanda kap dela ani mikpe gi teso thedewe tokpa gi mikpa jora. Di shigo re songo doas. Ani nganzo gi tongi tokpa la sra. Tokpa pheju madang ne ani tongi khanje to thoras.
topa de ta tamchi chena di chaza mandana ma toye ti rewa isra tanda ganzo di shiga do la de ra tena toni le de khandela ra tambo ale toni to bi khutsi ro tena wer da timma le sana ani ti ha ko ya igir nana da mi bite so kai kai ta di ta khala na ganzo gira mi bite so kai kan shi ne shi pas tena saje ji bi la shu la ra ta 타와 텐델 호아메 바다라 당아저 가스나야 파기 미세기 시다 수수고 로 참마 메라나 디고 마라 라 가스나 가저 란하데 제가 저기 렌데기 나샤이나레 가라줄라 치게 베주타야 대 뉴고 참마 타와디 요라 라디 요바딜라야 베데마르바요 알라나 요 마레스 디니 기타데 하코고라 돈이레 오나 요레라나 요레스 요레 타니디 요레스라 오나데 데마르바 랑은데바 랑츠구투바 딘데지 요르벨라나 요 마레스 와 땅아 저기 타니디 예비 로지 타니디 예반제 로지 고라 디체 아니야 덴바 두번 제비게 로디 메버체 오라 덴제데 빵 고라 디니기 카탄시에 또 동부 알레 또 신나 아니 뜻을 하이주라 베나 안에 나와 텐델 호아 메바타스 동바 켈레 동바 가서 동바니 켈레라 동바 켈레 제유 고아니 있으라다 다딜라 칼레 동바 켈레레들 라시지 투비 있으라다 켈레 발라 드레질 샤시라 라시지 투비 저기 찌기요나 잠자서 찍지나 따탈로로 찍지나 체달로라 가서나 늦어 상마 열에라네 가르치는 덴버버 열라나 따탈로셔라 덴버버 요마라 다오나 요마르디 베드 코라 자와니 요마레 타니데 요마르나 체달로라 따치니기 따탈라야만 이게 체달라야만 이게 요 먼저도 요아르라네 요레 타니데 요아레 자지기 남자 티고 디 요레스 라 딘디기 로도 가지로 된대로와 타이나 오늘 덴버 투바다 라시 투바 랑군 투바 딘데기 지여라나 요 마레라 디니 परू शायद पे कल खबर 딘데 जिलंगा जो तंगबानी शावरा.
So well, I think with this question we are now touching upon exactly what verse 12 is talking about. So when you raise this question, it is talking about the measure of having realized emptiness. So the 12th verse actually touches upon that. So if you read the verse number 12, yet when the knowledge that the verse number 11, the knowledge that appearances, verse number 11 and 12, the knowledge that appearances arise unfailingly in dependence, and the knowledge that they are empty and beyond all assertions. As long as these two appear to you as separate, there can be no realization of the Buddha's wisdom. And then moving on, yet when they arise at once, not each in turn, but both together, then through merely seeing unfailing dependent origination, certainty is born, and all modes of misapprehension fall apart. That is when discernment of the view herein referring to the view of emptiness, has reached perfection. So before we talk about realizing emptiness, we need to be able to posit what exactly do we mean by emptiness. And now this is the task of the Buddhist philosopher, to be able to posit emptiness right in the middle of the extremes of nihilism and the extreme of permanence. And this is a very, very difficult task, to be able to place it firmly between these two extremes. And in order to be able to do so, one needs to perform a series of rational analysis to be able to posit it firmly there. For example, when we say that, okay, we understand that emptiness is the lack of inherent existence of self and phenomena. Then if we say that things lack inherent existence, then there is the danger that we might immediately fall towards one extreme, saying that if things lack inherent existence, if things do not exist objectively, then they do not exist at all. They do not exist at all. That is falling to the extreme of nihilism. Then there is the other extreme of permanence, wherein you begin to say that, you begin to deny that things do not have objective existence, and you begin to say that things are actually objectively existent. They exist on their own. They are able to sustain their entity as an object on its own. So these are the two extremes. Now the task of a Buddhist philosopher or someone trying to understand emptiness is to place their understanding of the view of emptiness right between that, not denying the functionality of things, nor denying emptiness and asserting the permanence of things. So for example, there is a book here. The book appears to us, but we say that the book does not have any objective existence. The book in itself does not establishes its existence as a book. But this does not mean that the book is not able to perform the function of being a book. So when we try to understand emptiness, we have to be able to posit the functionality of a book simultaneously as we negate the objective existence of the book. Yes. So let's explore this with a question. So let's ask, let's have this question. Does this pen exist?
열elana.
Does this
Yore
pen
yamar.
exist?
Huh?
Yours.
Yes, ra. Ra. Tadi dembat be yorelana.
Then does it truly exist?
Cuz
It doesn't exist? It has a function. Yoba mare ina ya tunjin di baris.
lori lagda. Khara mara chila chita.
You have an answer? Does it? The first question was, does it exist? Then the second question is, we add a qualifier to it. Does it truly exist as a pen?
Tadi tiparul pe ikal khawda. Ra. Manzoge tani de yue la tani de yue kasana ganzo ki de tongda. De cheshin gombare nga igi ti lega che igi siji do. Ra. Di kora yo maralana digimda. De tongbare de zani ne yo manana men. Ta one yue na yue ta shi ro ta ko. Ra. 또 배 받아 달라고 있나래. 딱 한데 그거는 라신 거는 대바 두 번째 이거 말이라고. 라. 디니 뻘을 안저 샤트. 진짜 내가 보면 되게 깔리 카보다. 라도 롱을 착하보다. 제가 저기 엔들라 와라. 배나 최단지 대바 마디 버리 최단지 배드 칼라 칼. 대바 두 두자에 메도 라와이나. 라. 대바 두면 아니 가서 렌데기 남샤 요 말했어요. 가서 랭엠 바사 아니 지금 미스 꼬마제 잡아채네. 가서 요 도고 말했어. 가서 그 민도 할래. 라. 디네 벳잔 메바 말했어. Yoris, lende ipen ngazo le duja sain den debu nyong koy de yoris. Ra. Ta demba tu pa rangun tu pa chitu tu pa tende shira na yomares. Ti isim ni ngazo ninjala shat go go da. Ngazo chi ona mena bed kora mela ya. Yene bed demba tu yele. Ti poru ngazo ka yeti kora.
So now if we kind of take some time to think about emptiness, then one would come to the realization that indeed the negation of the objective existence of a pen is not the difficult task. The difficulty is in positing the conventional existence of a pen. So when we say that the pen is empty of intrinsic pen is empty of being intrinsically existent. So then, from the Buddhist perspective, we make an assertion that things do not even have a particle of inherent existence or essential existence. So this we can effectively negate logically, rationally, with reasoning. Now the difficulty is in positing the manner in which it actually does exist, conventionally, not ultimately, because conventionally, convention herein referring to a term or an imputation of a term or imputation by the mind of this pen as a pen. So this conventional existence of a pen is very, very difficult to posit, because we have to kind of find a way in which we are able to posit the lack of intrinsic existence within the framework of its conventional existence. So if you think about emptiness carefully, that is the difficulty, not understanding emptiness in the sense that the pen lacks objective existence, but being able to posit its conventional existence as a pen.
다 시 대가랑라 샤와이나라 mambo 산다. 딜라 나왕나 이여와체. 라. 아니 나와다 똥바니제 디가라 이여와체. 디삼당오다. 디삼당마드나 나와도 요나 아니 똥바 말에 거의 누알아야체. 똥바에서나 아니 그 나와야 메바서나. 라. 배는 나와다 나도 순주래다. 나와다 똥바니제 냠도 샤트웨. 라. 티 레라 말 주마처럼 또니 고래 게 라마 셴바든들라 계시티라 배는 가란다지 라테마도 내미 셴바기 리파다 코란들라 셴도 자체도 야포테토라 안 캬라지 테블로 아니 배는 미예 가란 고알렌스실라 미 셴바기 만다와 렌스라 근데 이디가라 캬라지 미 셴바라 계시티 아니 소소기 테블로 엔데 산타에 베케셴라 근데 이디타 디나로라 카르스노나 타와도 똥바니디 시직라 샤투에 라 페나 안데라기도 똥바 켈레트 고 페나 타와 텐델로레디 가도 타와도 샤라 된 타와도 샤 똥바 켈레트 고 아니레디 똥바도 샤 지시 소소 나와 데시들라 타도니디 소소 나와 데와이나 단도 카카도 차드나 시직라 샤마도니라 지시 소소 나와 데시들라 타도니디 페도 코라 카가도지라 지수소소 그니까 타대 버려진 하대와이나 다든 투비 고마 또요 말했어 라 다든 투비 고마 또봐 메일라다 근데 그 또요 말했어 제든 한도 순줄래더라 나랑 로고래 대시 저 깔 카보도라 다 근데도 또면 다 간대지 골라나 나시 렌저 메바 나시 다 뒤주치글래 레오도 다 곰도잖아 뭐 버체더라 군인이데 찌갈라 샤도 나시 렌저 메바 치차르트라 하와다 아니 다 가서 동안이 치차드 라 샤투나 디디갈라 아니 텐데 물로 통화 장니니 디디갈라 아니 텐데 로아 메바도 또와 아니 년해 유진 전당 것이 나라서 로기다 동쇼 단다다 년해를 동쇼로 거기서라 이때 가시진 따이는데 년해 유진 전당 것이 년해 수수 되네 동쇼기 아니 유들 수수는 전사기 시 라시지 주발에서라 전당 것이네스다 미바 메바로 차이라 그 시나 대체 따외 제바 조발라 디디갈라 아니 타 타투기 아니 제바디 아니 요소 조바 차이레스
So now we need to kind of bring this discussion back to the root text itself and place it within the framework of the root text itself. So how do we make sense of this conventional existence and the ultimate reality of the pen as being non-existent, not being truly existent? So if you look at verse number 11, so it exactly makes this point. So the knowledge that appearances arise unfailingly in dependence, and the knowledge that they are empty and beyond all assertions. As long as these two appear to you as separate, there can be no realization of the Buddha's wisdom. So the conventional existence of the pen herein refers to the appearance. So conventional existence can be simply understood as apparent reality, the reality which appears to us, not ultimate reality or reality as it is. So the apparent reality of the pen as a pen and the true or ultimate reality of the pen as being empty of being truly a pen. Now these two exist on the same basis, and unless and until these two appear like separately to us, the conventional existence and the ultimate reality of the pen as being not truly established, as long as these two appear to be some sort of two different realities to us, then we have not grasped what emptiness really means. Emptiness so in Buddhism we talk about a conventional reality and an ultimate reality, and so it's making here at this point that the conventional and the ultimate realities are not two separate realities in and of themselves, that these two realities are intertwined, they are understood and perceived on the same basis. Yes. Yes. Tang nyugo dembar maduba re la warwas. Di koa khare lagi or stebo chire masons.
Tanga nyugo la digala. Manzogi chitang ngana zo logi pa dodo chila pa nyugo la nta cha ra. The nyugo re la di nyugo di gold re di tsushi de re di khade re la pa chachi tanga na. Pa ta shi che wa chana nga zo dembar tuba chi nyegi mida. Ra di yo mar la wona ma tani de nga zo chawa chi nyegi yo mar di la wo mares.
So first, when we try to understand terms such as truly existent, we need to first look at the manner in which a pen appears to us. So when you perceive a pen, how does it appear to you? As a solid, absolute thing, an entity which establishes its own existence as a pen, right? So that means that it appears to have some objective existence, that the pen is able to establish its own existence from the object side itself. Yes? So, yes? So when we say that the pen is not truly existent, we are carrying a rational analysis of whether the pen truly does exist as it appears to us. So when you begin to look for what we call pen on the object, then we begin to see that the pen is nowhere existent. For example, the nib is not the pen. The parts which make up the pen is not the pen. So even though it appears to us as if the pen establishes itself objectively, when we analyze it, it is not objectively established as a pen. We impute that term mentally, conceptually, onto the object and say that that is a pen. The pen itself does not establishes itself as a pen. So this is what we mean by the pen is not truly existent or truly established. Okay, let's relate to this yourself personally. What is your name? Avi.
Avi tradre Avi reve, ra, Tongba Avi reve, Lapa Avinel, Pachagan on the name da. Zanzaki, Tachara, Avi Ladigala, Dabu Jamiji, Lud Dabu Jani, Ye Lupula, Ye Lupula digala, Lubu the Chiramainke, Zubu the Ra, Chiramainke, Dabu Ye Zupula digala, Avi the Passion Majla Dodo. Ra, T. Nil the Mother, Devacha Sanya, Avi Zupula. Ra. Zanda ta ona namshi de rebelana zanda abi namshi lera ra atu jitu sa dipa maraji ro ina abi yorbe yore semba gaya yore duya yore lo che nye di dua thani de dua ina nga tu pa demo de jit khare tsuga de ne mani ji ro ra zanda nga tu pa ta nge chara ge zo po shaga ji me to ma nge abi to su la wara ra nge ge thoya de abi chadan ji thong thu go ra thugo mare anju pa lo ba ta nge abi ngo to abi ma ge de shanga ni ke she thiwa thile che gi la lagora nge thoya khare abi ngo de abi rebela na mara tende ro ta tende ji ge thong ga to inju so chi ko da.
So now we would think that Avi is truly existent. Now if Avi is truly existent, then what we call Avi must be findable. We must be able to find what exactly is Avi. So then, herein we are trying to find the referent object of what we call Avi, right? So Avi is a term, and it refers to something. So then, if it refers to something, then the referent object of the term Avi must be found, if Avi truly does exist. Now, herein, when we begin to look where is Avi, then is the hair on top of Avi's head Avi? Then is Avi's head Avi? Then we begin to realize that, okay, maybe the referent object of the term Avi does not exist. And then we also look at the manner in which, the contradictory manner in which we kind of refer to ourselves or refer to ourselves. For example, sometimes we say that my body, it's not keeping too well, wherein it seems to suggest that there is something separate from the body, which is Avi, right? Then sometimes we also seem to say that, okay, I need to take care of my mind, which seems to suggest that there is something apart from the mind, which is Avi. Yes? So this is the manner in which we think, we take that term Avi for granted as being truly existent. Now, there are also many different ways in which this contradiction is highlighted. For example, if I only see your head, and if I see your head, then I begin to say, oh, I saw Avi. But then that seems to suggest that, okay, only the head of Avi is Avi. So when we look at this kind of contradictory manners in which we relate to a term such as Avi or a pen, then we begin to realize that even though it exists as a term, if we have to find the referent object of that term, because if it is truly existent, then the referent object must be found. We should be able to pinpoint to something and say that this is Avi or this is the pen. But this is impossible. So that's why we say that phenomena and the self are not truly existent.
Can't Avi consist of multiple things?
So that is exactly what we mean by interdependence, dependent arising.
That means Avi is dependent on multiple
Yes, now if we carry this really strictly along the lines of Buddhist investigation, then we would say that avi as the term exists, but avi as the person is a fictitious imagination of the mind.
But then where is emptiness?
Hmm?
If all some of the all thoughts is avi.
Hmm. So, as we already discussed before, if we have to understand emptiness, we have to understand dependent arising. So what does dependent arising mean? Things arise in dependence on a network of causes and conditions. So that's exactly what emptiness means. If things are dependently arising, then they are necessarily empty of inherent existence.
That's all, Ani. Suja.
So maybe we break here for tea.
Share to my young like some.
Otherwise, maybe emptiness might prove a little bit too difficult.